So many reading events, so little time. Hello and welcome back to Bookish, and welcome to a video in which I'm actually going to talk about books, not politics, not anything else, just books. This is a month filled with reading events, and then my own personal reading event, which I just usually refer to as read whatever the hell I want to. So this video is going to be kind of a blend of those. I'm not going to divide the timestamps up by books, but rather by reading, the categories in which I put these books in terms of reading them. So to start off with reading whatever the hell I want to, because that's kind of one of my priorities in August. The first book that I read and finished in the month of August was The Trouble with Mrs. Montgomery Hurst by BookTube's own Katie Lumsden, and I did a full review of that, which I will leave linked at the end of this video. Let me just say that it is an incredibly fun read. It is incredibly entertaining. Its characters are really well developed. It has a kind of an intricate, interwoven plot, which I found to be really good and compelling. And I just encourage anyone out there in the BookTube world, the book reading world, to read it. The second book I read this month was Ghost Mountain by Ronan and Hession. You may know that Hession is one of my favorite kind of working authors right now. I've read now all three of his books. The first, Leonard and Hungry Paul, is probably the one that's most well known. Just one of my favorite books that I've read since I've been on BookTube. Just such a quiet, gentle, kind of character study of people living just regular lives. And I can't even now put my finger on exactly why it touched me so much or why I liked it, but I did. I also read Panenka, his second book, which is also really good, but more focused on one single character. And then in Ghost Mountain, I think Hession is going to be attempting something a little bit more ambitious than he did in his first two books. So to just kind of give you a shortcut on the plot. Somewhere in Ireland, a mountain shows up out of nowhere. A mountain that nobody's ever seen before. It's pretty perfectly canonical, and it's round at the bottom. So it really is kind of shaped like a funnel or a cone. And on one side are these like three depressions, which kind of form the face of a ghost. If you think about a ghost like you would cut out of a sheet to make a ghost costume. And the presents are the appearance of this mountain kind of throws a monkey wrench into a lot of people's lives. And so what the book really looks at is, in some way, kind of how Ghost Mountain affects the lives of these characters who, in some way or another, are all connected to one another. How it disrupts a marriage. How it disrupts relationships between parents and their kids. How it creates relationships between unlikely groups of people. And it really is, I think, kind of a really effective look at how outside forces sometimes have an impact on the lives of people in unexpected ways. And the thing about Ghost Mountain is, and when you're reading the book and as you're going along, the characters are kind of questioning what it is and what it's there for. And repeatedly, Hession just says, Ghost Mountain is Ghost Mountain. And that you are then to make of it, I think, whatever you want to. And certainly his characters do. There are incredibly powerful, I think, stories of love here and relationships. There are some arresting images having to do perhaps with the deaths of some of the characters. There is kind of questioning about the way relationships work and how love works differently for different people. There are stories and things about grief here and loss. There are, bad people, good people appear in the story. And there are also a lot of really funny bits. I don't want to give anything away and giving away spoilers, but there's one scene involving the police questioning of a person, and it is just laugh out loud funny, I thought, in several places. And that's true for Ghost Mountain as well. I really thought it was ambitious work. I liked it a lot. I'll probably have to read it again to come up with my final thoughts on it. But if you are interested in that kind of book, I would definitely encourage you to read it. So those are the two books I read just because I wanted to. This is also, this month or last month, saw the announcement of the Booker Prize long list. So I'm also going to be doing some kind of casual Booker Prize long list reading. I have no intention of reading all the books on the list, and primarily I am going to perhaps purchase the books I think sound most interesting to me, and I'm going to read the others that my library has. I'll get back to this again when I talk about what I'm reading currently. But I've read two of the books on the Booker Prize list. I've read James by Percival Everett, which is excellent. I read Wandering Stars by Tommy Orange, which I thought was really, really good. And the book on the list which interested me the most was Wild Houses by Colin Barret. He's an Irish writer. I believe this is his first novel, and it comes with some really heavyweight blurbs from people like Brandon Taylor and Sally Rooney and Colin Toybeen and Roddy Doyle. You know, kind of a lot of Irish writers, well, Brandon Taylor not necessarily, but kind of a lot of Irish writers on the list praising this book. And so, you know, I like books by Irish writers, books set in Ireland, so I bought this one and read it. And essentially what it is the story of two families who are connected because of their connection kind of in the world of, I'm just going to say, small-time drug dealing. One of the people, or one of the families, the older brother is involved in drug dealing, and he runs afoul of kind of a much bigger criminal, and he can't pay that person back, and this other kind of crime drug family is essentially going to try to force him to pay him back by kidnapping his little brother named Doll. And that's kind of the framework of the plot, but really what I think the book is kind of a character study of two characters. One is kind of a giant of a man named Dev, who lives in the home out in the countryside, which is used as a drug drop-off point, and which Doll is going to be brought to once he's kidnapped and held there. It's a kind of look at Dev and his problems and his issues with, you know, loneliness and wanting to be a loner, with some issues he had as a young man growing up, and how those kind of play out in his life. And then the other character I think is really interesting, is Doll's girlfriend Nikki, who plays a really important role, oftentimes kind of a catalyst in things happening in the novel. And I think both those characters, you know, there's some parallels between them. There are some differences between them about how they choose to, you know, take action or not take action. And on the surface, they're both kind of equally passive, but at various points in time, they will take some decisive action, which kind of moves the plot along. I saw Mark Nash's review of this book, and I have a tendency to agree with him in general. I don't think beyond that there's a whole lot that's happening here. There are occasionally really kind of clever and arresting kind of uses of language and description. But, you know, on the whole, I think this is just kind of a pretty good, interesting novel with two interesting characters, I think. But I was kind of surprised that it was on the Booker long list, because it doesn't seem to be going much outside the confines of that, unless I missed something. So, you know, it's a good Irish novel. There's a crime element. There's a plot that I think makes it move, and there are at least two good characters. By the way, the other minor characters I think are really well described, with the exception of a character named Sketch, which I think is kind of a clever name for perhaps the character who's the least well defined. Anyway, but you know, I think it's worth a read if you're interested in that kind of novel. So those are the first three books I read, and those were I'm kind of classify them under the heading of read whatever the hell I want to. This is also Women in Translation Month, which, you know, I wanted to participate in, and I had 3 novels that I want to read. I've read 2 of those. So the first novel for Women in Translation Month that I read was The Vegetarian by Han Kang, which was translated from the Korean by Deborah Smith. And I read that first. I read that on my Kindle, so I don't have a physical copy of it. And I was able to get that through my library again, which, you know, was great. And if you don't know, The Vegetarian, I think, won the International Booker Prize a few years back, or maybe did the rounds on BookTube for quite a while, and I'd been meaning to read it for a while. And I'm really glad I got to it for this month's Women in Translation Month. I've only read one other book by Han Kang, and that's Human Acts, which I really liked, and I thought it was really good. And I still think it's a little bit better than The Vegetarian. To me, having just read those 2, Human Acts kind of probably got the world's attention, and then The Vegetarian, which I think pretty sure came out after that, is the one that made Han Kang, you know, kind of a recognized right around the world. The Vegetarian is really kind of 3 vignettes, novelettes maybe, all centered around a young woman who decides to become a vegetarian after having a dream. And really, what I think is most fascinating about this, and one of the things I think is most disturbing about this, is that we see this young woman through the eyes of 3 other people. So she's the main character, but we don't see the story through her perspective. We see the story through the perspective of these 3 other people: her husband, her brother-in-law, and her sister. And how her decision to become a vegetarian affected them, and how her decision to become a vegetarian reveals things about her family, and about her relationship with all these other people. I thought that was really, really done effectively. There's disturbing stuff here. I mean, clearly this young woman, I think, has suffered some sort of a mental breakdown. Now, on the surface, I thought to myself, what's the big deal? Just let this woman be a vegetarian. Why is everyone trying to make her eat meat? But as you go on, not that they shouldn't have let her be a vegetarian, you realize that, you know, it's more than just that. And I won't give away any more than that, but there's more to it than just her wanting to become a vegetarian. But we see then how these other three people have, in some ways, perhaps defined themselves or feel like they're defined by the relationship with her, define themselves because of how they deal with her, or look at her as an object of desire, and how those stories play themselves out and kind of the effects it has, oftentimes tragic effect that it has on these various people. I just thought it was really well done. I don't think I can say I love the book. I've heard that some people have questions about the ending. I thought the ending was pretty good, considering everything else that went along. There is no clear, well, there's not an incredibly clear resolution. And again, since we don't see the story from the eyes of the young woman who is the vegetarian, the titular character, then I think it's always kind of going to have this somewhat unclear ending. But I'll leave that to you to read. I did think it was really good, and definitely am glad that I read it. The other book I've read so far for Women in Translation Month, it's Mammoth by Eva Baltasar, translated from the Catalan by Julia Sanchez. And you may know that Boulder is one of the books I've talked about most of my channel since I read it, I don't know, a year or two ago. And so I was really looking forward to Baltasar's latest book, and this is it. I also have a copy of her novel Permafrost, which I'm going to read in September for Shorty September. But Mammoth is a really short novella. It's only about 100 pages. It's essentially the story of this young woman who decides that she wants to get pregnant and have a baby, that she doesn't want to live the life of kind of the normal life of Western society. She doesn't like having jobs because she feels like she's selling her dignity. She moves out to the middle of nowhere and then gets involved with people out there, which I won't go into because they're kind of spoilers, who then kind of make you question, really, is dignity something with her, and why does she want this child? And there are all kinds of questions raised about her. And, the story itself is one thing, but again, I watched Mark Nash's review of this book after I finished reading Mammoth. And what really is striking about the book is the writing itself. So I'm going to do what he did. He just opened the book to a page randomly. So I don't have any marked. He just opened the page randomly to give some idea of how good the writing was. So I'm going to try that as well. In late June, the whole city oozed with swelter. During the day, the city ripened, self-corrupted, beginning in the marrow of every last resident. By night, it was an exhausted organism collapsing at the sea. I started having dinner on the balcony, a handkerchief for table linen, candles, and in a bowl, cherries as fat and moist as eyeballs. On the other side of the street, the walls of the zoo fell quiet. At that time of day, the barbed wire fence made the place look like the border of an impoverished country. I focused my attention on the canopy above it and slowly ate dinner. The trees were soft and formed cushions padded with beaks and warbles. When the light dimmed, the birds died, and the trees turned blue. They held that silence inside them and seemed to prop up the whole world, even me. I didn't know exactly, but there was no denying it. I just thought there are so many arresting images, so many incredibly beautiful passages in the book, that it is the writing which overwhelms, I think, the plot and the characters themselves. No matter if you like the plot or the character. And by the way, one of the things I like most about Baltasar is she doesn't necessarily care if you like her characters, obviously here in Mammoth. But the writing is just absolutely incredible. That's what I've read so far this month. So then, in addition to that, have just got a copy, or just got access to the audiobook of A Life by Keith Richards. This is kind of his autobiography told through a ghostwriter. And I went up to see my mom and came back yesterday. So I had about 5 hours in the car. So I listened to about 6-7 hours of the audiobook. I listen to audiobooks at 1.5 speed. And I have to say that on the whole, I'm enjoying Keith Richards' autobiography. I think it definitely qualifies for the garbology category. I don't think anybody's going to see this as serious literature or a serious work of nonfiction. But I am interested in musicians and artists, and this is a book I thought, we all, I think, or many of us who know who Keith Richards are, have preconceived ideas about what Keith Richards is like, and this book pretty much confirms all of them. I will say that his the misogyny and I think the racial paternalism of the time period when she grew up definitely show. I'm not in any way suggesting that Keith Richards is a racist. I don't believe he is, but I think he has kind of a paternal attitude towards black people, which comes through time to time, is there. But I find myself fascinated by musicians and artists who talk about how they became what they are. You know, how did he become a musician? How did he become interested in the kind of music he listens to? What were his musical origins? How did he teach himself to play the guitar? How does he play the guitar? How does he see, hear, create music? How did he become a songwriter? And those things, I think, are here and they're interesting. And so far, they're worth wading through everything else. Now, I have to be honest with you. I'm not all that interested in the years, you know, the Rolling Stones necessarily at their heyday and all the excess that went along with that. So I'm not guaranteeing I'm going to finish this, but the first few hours I have definitely enjoyed. I'm also engaged in Faulkner and August, and this year we are reading Faulkner and August As I Lay Dying, which I've said many times I think is one of the perfect books to read as your first Faulkner. We have a lively Voxer discussion group, and I have read 3 of the 4 sections in which the book was divided, you know, for our reading purposes, and I am enjoying it as I enjoy all Faulkner. I'm always amazed at Faulkner's ability to recreate the world which he is putting on the page. You know, we credit and we think about writers like Joyce, for instance, for kind of recreating Dublin from 1903 and the whole thing you could rebuild the city from just reading his book. You know, Faulkner is achieving no less a thing in essentially all of his books set in Yoknapatawpha County. He has created this fictional county, and he's populating it with people he knows and character types he knows and events that he knows happens. He's exposing all of those, you know, in the same way that we think of Joyce exposing some of the hypocrisy, perhaps, of Ireland around the turn of the century. Faulkner is doing that here in As I Lay Dying and in all the other books as well. And there is no target, I think, that is safe from Faulkner. I don't think there's anything he holds so sacred that he will not expose its hypocrisy or perhaps satirize it in some way. And so I'm really enjoying As I Lay Dying on that level. And then going forward, what I'm going to read, I'm going to continue my Booker Prize reading, and I'm going to start with the book Orbital by, who's that by? Samantha Harvey. And the reason why I'm reading Orbital is I could get a copy of it from my library, and that's what's really going to determine my Booker Prize reading from now on, is can I get it from the library either in physical or ebook form. And if I can, I'm going to read as many of those books as I feel like. If I get burned out on it, I'll stop. Like I said, I have no interest in reading the entire Booker Prize list. And then there are a few other books that I want to get to. I definitely am going to get to Kairos by Jennie Erpenbeck. Erpenbeck is one of my favorite women in translation authors. German author. I believe Kairos won the International Booker Prize this year. This will be, I think, my 3rd or 4th Erpenbeck book, and so, you know, I'm excited to get to it, even though I've heard kind of mixed things about it. And then I also have a mystery by Arnaldur Indridsson, who is a Icelandic mystery writer. It's called Jar City. I don't want to get to that this month too, but we'll see. You know, a lot of ambitious reading plans. Not sure where we'll go. If you have thoughts about anything I'm reading, anything I've said, please leave those in the comment section down below. And as always, thank you for watching.